Hello everyone, this is CRH Films, and this is the film Sully. Captain lands an Airbus A320 with 155 passengers on the Hudson River in the middle of New York City. Based on real events, the film begins at bird's eye altitude. Captain Chesley Sullenberger reports to the dispatcher about the failure of both engines. He guides the plane for a river landing amidst the cityscape. However, the speed and altitude are insufficient, so the plane grazes a building with its wing. Subsequently, the airliner crashes into another building and explodes. But it's all just the captain's horrifying dream. Coming to his senses, Sully goes for a run, narrowly avoiding being hit by a taxi. Later, in the hotel bathroom, he reflects on what happened. While getting dressed, he watches the news coverage of the rescue of Flight 1549. Passengers thank the pilot for saving their lives. Then, Sully attends the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, hearing investigating the incident. Sully and the co-pilot, Jeff Skiles, face suspicions of unprofessionalism, putting the lives of 155 passengers at risk. The captain, with 40 years of experience, explains that the altitude and speed were insufficient for a return to the departure airport. However, the commission doubts his explanation. They ask Sully several questions about sleep, alcohol and drug use, blood sugar levels, and any personal issues at home. In the end, the commission announces they will conduct a computer simulation similar to what the pilots experienced to explore other possible outcomes. The pilots are not pleased with this development, but a taxi driver considers them heroes, lifting their spirits. Meanwhile, Sully calls his wife, who informs him about the media frenzy around their home and the hotel. In his hotel room, Sully tells his wife that the investigation will delay his return by a few days. Journalists learn some details from the investigation and criticize Sully for dismissing the option of returning to the airport. Yet, it's all just another nightmare. Sully calls Jeff, and the men go for an evening stroll. Jeff reveals they are guests on David Letterman's show, which is good news. However, the fear that Sully's achievements may be overshadowed by the commission's mistake saddens him. During the interview, Sully remains unresponsive to the journalists' provocative questions. He recalls the early days of his pilot career. After the interview, despite kind words from the makeup artist, Sully is haunted by a horrifying vision. He freezes as the plane flies between skyscrapers, crashes into a building, and explodes. He doesn't immediately react to the words of Mike Cleary, the president of the U.S. Airline Pilots Association, who came to take Sully to the next NTSB meeting. Mike reports the initial results of the investigation. Mechanics concluded that the left engine was idling. During the hearing, Jeff claims that if the captain had followed the instructions, they would all have been mourned by now. He adds that thanks to Sully's professionalism, he didn't follow all the steps outlined in the instructions but immediately did what saved passengers' lives. Sully adds that no one knows the A320 better, but the commission stands firm. They assert that the left engine was operational and the altitude and speed were sufficient to return to the airport. This is also confirmed by 20 computer simulations. Sully wants to know the data and conditions under which the simulations were conducted. However, this information is classified until the end of the investigation. The commission takes a break until the data from the black box are decrypted. Meanwhile, the entire crew of Flight 1549 appears on David Letterman's show. Afterwards, Sully talks to his wife, who is anxious about letters from the bank. Sully reassures his wife and shares his concerns. We are taken back to the same day of departure. Sully buys a snack at the airport shop, and passengers purchase souvenirs. While people settle into their seats, the captain and the co-pilot prepare for takeoff. Jeff highly appreciates Sully's side job as an aviation safety expert. Despite the website claiming a large workforce, Sully actually works alone. While the flight attendant reads the mandatory instructions, pilots, with the dispatcher's permission, head to the runway. Sully reports readiness for takeoff, and moments later, the plane lifts off the ground. But a minute later, a flock of birds collides with the aircraft, causing both engines to lose thrust. Sully tries to restart them, but apart from flashing lights in the cabin, nothing happens. The flight attendant asks passengers to check their seat belts. Meanwhile, Sully informs the dispatcher about the critical situation. An emergency return to the airport is planned, leading to the cancellation of other departures and landings. However, the captain insists they won't make it and opts to land on the Hudson. Sully instructs passengers to brace for impact. Meanwhile, Controllers see the plane disappearing from radars right in the middle of the river. They are convinced Sully is heading to the airport, as landing on the water is considered suicide. Tourists on a sightseeing boat witness the plane at a critically low altitude. The plane crashes into the water, and that's where the memory ends. After talking to his wife, Sully goes for a run to distract himself. However, the advertising screens on buildings broadcasting reports from the crash scene prevent him from doing so. Looking at an aircraft carrier, Sully recalls his past again. During a training flight, an engine smoked, but Sully managed a successful landing. Afterward, he goes to a bar, where the bartender recognizes him. The bartender treats Sully to a cocktail named in his honor. While visitors praise Sully as a hero, he recalls that fateful day. Townspeople, unaware of what's happening, watch in confusion as the plane flies between buildings. Passengers pray and prepare for the worst. In a moment, the plane makes a not-so-soft landing in the Hudson River. Sully rushes into the cabin and orders everyone to evacuate. He then opens the doors and inflates the emergency slide. Flight attendants try to calm passengers and instruct them to open the emergency doors leading to the wings. Some passengers are overly confident, jumping into the water to swim to the shore. However, they realize they overestimated their abilities and turn back in time. Meanwhile, the ferry captain sails to the scene of the tragedy, informing the Coast Guard en route about what has happened. In a few minutes, the ship arrives for the rescue. While sailors are lifting people on board, another ship approaches the plane. Meanwhile, reporters on the shore calculate how long a person can endure in the water at such a temperature. Divers also rescue people who involuntarily ended up in icy water. After checking the entire plane for passengers, Sully, like a true captain, is the last to leave the ship. Later, all the plane passengers are safe. Sully boards the ferry, then looks back at the crash site. Afterward, he calls his wife to reassure her that he is okay. On the shore, a representative of the company greets the captain. Sully asks him to ensure that all 155 passengers are alive and unharmed. Meanwhile, passengers call their loved ones to let them know they are safe. Soon, the relieved dispatcher receives the good news that the plane has successfully landed. Meanwhile, the pilots are taken to the hospital for examination. Sully records an elevated pulse, but when informed that all 155 passengers survived, he is somewhat relieved. Afterward, the pilots are accommodated in a hotel, and a manager even hugs the pilot who saved so many lives. The pilots are given new clothes, and the memories end there. Watching the TV report, Sully hears that the pilots had no time to make decisions, sparking an interesting thought. He calls the airline representative and requests a simulation with real pilots, confident that human results will differ significantly from computer results. The hearing begins at Sully's request with a live broadcast, during which pilots attempt to land the plane under the same conditions as Jeff and Sully. The pilots successfully land at the airport. The commission emphasizes that the results of the pilots and the computer are the same, then broadcasts the pilots successfully landing at the alternate airport. After seeing this, Sully says that the simulator pilots knew what to expect and had a predetermined solution, unlike him and Jeff. They relied on their skills, expertise, and acted in the situation. After Sully's words, Jeff asks how many attempts it took for the pilots. A commission member answers 17. Immediately after, a new simulation begins. Pilots are given 35 seconds to make a decision in a difficult situation. The plane crashes right in front of the runway during this scenario and crashes into a building when landing at the alternate airport. Commission members realize they were mistaken and decide to listen to the black box recording. We are transported back to that day. After colliding with a flock of birds, Sully realizes that the altitude and speed are not enough to return to the airport. He makes the only right decision to land the plane on the Hudson River. After a successful landing, we return to the hearing room. Sully requests a brief break to compose himself. In the corridor, he praises Jeff for his ability to remain calm in a stressful situation. When the pilots return to the room, the commission announces that after examining the left engine, it became clear that it was damaged by the bird strike. They add that if not for Sully, all 155 passengers and crew would have perished. In the end, we are told that all 155 passengers were saved within 24 minutes, and photos are shown of those directly involved in the rescue. The movie concludes on this note.